Hey guys, welcome back to Almost Inevitable Design. My name is still PK and I make WordPress tutorials for website developers and designers. Alright, so we are now that you've learned Flex, hopefully that helped. If not, you can always come back and watch again, right? Today we're going to learn about Grid. Grid is, is a slightly newer layout system. It is slightly different from Flex in that it is what a lot of people say is two-dimensional as opposed to Flex, which is one-dimensional. What that means is Flex is just it is just going with width, and you can line break that. You can break that, wrap it technically. You can wrap it, but still it just goes off in one line. Whereas Grid, you're drawing lines in two-dimensional space and you're plotting the blocks in that space. So the difference between single dimension and two-dimensional makes sense. It's correct, but another thing is you can use Flex and Grid for each other technically. I mean, you can use Flex for things that would have been done well with Grid and vice versa, but the main difference for me, I think, is Flex. If you want to do things in Flex, then the HTML structure matters a little more, because if you want like huge sidebars, not huge, but if you want a sidebar, or if you want like whatever, then it's sort of, and even inside a little card, you put a lot of stuff in there, then the Flex the HTML structure matters a little more. With Grid, you can put them all as a single direct child of that Grid container, and that's just it. It just takes care of everything, and you can plot everything from there. So there's use cases for both, for this and that, and it's really up to how you think you are going to build your stuff, and yeah, I think that makes sense. Oh yeah, one more thing. I think another thing that could be a major difference would be if you want things to be stuck inside a strict column, or if you want things to be stuck in columns within column lines, then you can go with Grid. But if you want things to stretch out a little bit, or wrap when they need to, depending on the size and that kind of stuff, then you need to use Flex. Okay, so if you're, for example, making a list of items, right, horizontal items, and then on mobile they need to scrunch up and they need to break the line, then you need to use Flex. Grid makes it a little harder to do that because you can't get that really fluid centered layout, where like if you have 5 and then you can have 3, and then single, you can't do that as well on Grid. Okay, so I'm going to start the timer now, and we are going to get into this. Just before we start, I'll just introduce what's going on here. I colored all the blocks separately so you can see what's going on. Some of them we might want to move things around, but I'll explain how things work once we get to styling it. Now I'm going to try to go really quickly through the 13 minutes. There's a lot of stuff to learn about Grid. You can learn that all in some of the reference links below. All the links and all the CSS files and all that is in the link below on my website, so come do that. Also like and subscribe, whatever happens to YouTube. You know how to use YouTube, right? Okay, so let's get started. Gonna start now, and there we go. Okay, so right now this is in display Grid. As you can see, in Firefox you can turn this on and off, which is a really great way of learning how the Grid works. So right now this is on, and you can't tell any difference because I put red lines around everything. So for now we'll just leave it off. Okay, so as you can see, they're all in Grid, but these are all just single columned rows, because it's just in display grid, and everything is just set in auto at the moment. Now, we are going to learn three really important things, right? Three really important things, and that is grid template columns, grid template rows, and grid template areas. Okay, we already learned justify content and align items and stuff in Flex. Right now, it's called justify items and align items. It uses very similar words, so we don't need to worry too much about it. You know, remember flex start and flex end? Same thing here, but just don't use flex, just use start. It's not grid start, it's just start. That's the only difference, okay? And it's called justify items for horizontal. Other than that, it's pretty straightforward, so we're not going to talk too much about that. We are going to talk about setting a grid, okay? Now, one more thing, like I said, everything is just a direct child of the grid container. As you can see, it is a direct child of the grid container, which is a very important point, because if you see a HTML structure that does not fit that, then you can't do this. It's people struggle with it when actually the reason is that it's impossible. Okay, so for example, if you're using a plugin that throws up a structure that you can't edit in CSS, then you're gonna have to find a different way. You can't grid yourself into everything. Okay, so now let's get into grid template columns. All right, grid template, I can't spell it properly. Okay, columns. Now here, let's say we want 3 columns. Okay, now we can do that by setting them as like 5 rem, 4 rem, 5 rem, and 6 rem. We can do that, right? If we do that, what we get is that. All right, that's 3, 4, 5. You can't tell much different. 4, 5, 6. You can't tell much difference there, but that's what that is. Now, of course, we can also put in garp. Gap. Where's the P? There it is. Okay. Yeah, we'll give it 1 rem just so we can see how the gaps are. There we go. And we can do that, but normally we need equal size, equal width columns, right? So a great way of doing that is using a unit called FR, which is a fraction. Okay, so we can say 1 FR, 1 FR, and 1 FR. That gives us exactly 33, 33, 33, minus the gaps, which is great because we don't have to actually do any calcs or anything. You can do like, because if you're doing this right now, you have 100% minus 2 rem divided by 3. You have to do a calc for that to get each size properly, right? But we don't need to do that. We set a gap and we set the fractions, and we can just get what we want, right? Another thing that we can do is use something called a repeat. Okay, now you repeat, let's say 3, and they're all in sizes of 1 fraction, and there you go, nothing changed. This is the most common way of setting things. Okay, now this is also a great way to set something like what would almost be similar to a bootstrap. Okay, which is great, and a lot of people do something like that. And once you set this up, then everything else from that point on, you can just get the widths of everything, and it'll just work a lot better. Okay, cool. Now with grid template rows, it's not as complicated, or is not as important as columns, because columns are what gives you a layout. Rows just stack, so it's not as style intensive, for lack of a better term, right? So normally people just write auto because that's all you need. Things will stick to the tallest one in that row, and that will happen to be in that column, and that's it. Okay, now one thing that you could do is something like something called min-max. Now min-max is really cool, and as you can see, it automatically my Sublime automatically fills up min-max with a grid way of doing it, because min-max is used the most in grid. It is used the most in grid because it's great. That means that you can scrunch things up and it will stay a certain minimum size of this min part, and it will stretch out to the largest, which is at an F1FR part. Okay, so that's really great. That is really great. So you can do stuff like 5rem. You can do 1FR. You can even do auto, and that means that the first row. Now it's good to. It's good to turn that on. Now you can see the first row is minimum 5rem and then auto. All right. So if the content is taller than 5rem, right? So if it's 6, then it doesn't really matter because it stretches it out to auto. Now, if you think about this, if you think about this layout right now, you'll see that, like I said, it's the first row. It's because what this is doing right now is just setting the first row. So if we take that and add another one, then you get 2 of them, like that. So they're both like that, right? Now the reason why we're here is because now we can do something like justify content. Okay, let's get to justify content, and that is horizontal, so we're not going to give it a width of 100. We're going to give it a width of, let's say, 50, just so we can see. Justify content end, and that means that these guys will be 50% ending up onto the right, left. Sorry, items. That's flex term. There you go. Cool. Align content. No, align items. And it's going to be, let's go end, just so we can see that it works. All right, because that is not the default, right? So now you see that it's down here. So the end and the end. There we go. All good. Cool. So another thing that we can do. So another thing is that we can, so you see here we have, I put in 2 min maxes, right? Now you can use a min max inside a repeat. So let's put that inside a repeat like that. All right, repeat. And the first number is how many? So can we put auto here, right? Let's put in 3 and it will give us exactly what we want, which is 3 rows of at least 5rem height rows. But if we put in auto, then it will break. As you can see, that doesn't work, right? So what we can do instead is something like this. Grid auto rows. So that makes everything all the rows automatic, but retaining the min max of 5rem. So now there we go. Cool. So that's all we need to know in setting the grid. One last thing that I think is very, 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 very important is grid template areas. Now, technically, what we have here in the grid itself is these lines actually have numbers to them. Okay, so that's line 1, that's line 2, that's line 3, and that's 4. So we can actually set these grid items to stretch between, for example, 1 and 2, and they will stay in here. If they stretch between 1 and if they stretch between 1 and 3, then they'll go all the way here. Now we don't actually want to do that. Okay, so let me just finish grid template row. Where's the? There we go. Okay, so we can't. I don't think that's actually the best way because it's very confusing unless you want things to be set in a very specific way, as in like if you're building, for example, if you're building off of a bootstrap type setup, right? Where you have like 12 columns and you're setting everything, and then the classes, the atomicized classes are like, they say from line 1 to line 5, that is a 5-column width, 4-column width, for example, that kind of stuff. If you're doing that, that might make sense, and you can actually put in CSS that gives it a certain width of columns, right? But I found that this is grid template areas is actually surprisingly more useful than how you would normally use the grid lines. Okay, so that's what we're gonna go for, and I'm gonna just explain that because later on when you try to edit layouts, this comes in very handy. Okay, so here's how you set things. Okay, let's give this, so you need, because we have 3, so just as a precaution, if you're using like a 12-column grid, this is not a good idea because you need to name all those 12. Okay, so this is great for smaller layouts like this guy, like that guy. So, you know, okay, so three of them, right? So we'll call them 1, 2, 3. Very, very inventive. You know what? 1, 2, 2, and you see 3, 3, 4. All right, and we'll add another line there, and now this will be 5, 6, and can I spell 6? 6 and 7. All right, cool. Now all we need to do is put in grid area. Now we're going to put in grid area for orange. All right, grid area. All right, well, that'll be 1. All right, we're going to keep adding that to each of these. So for blue, that'll be 2. And we're going to actually go here and go for 3 to this guy, just so we know that they're mixed up. All right, and 4 for this guy, and 7 just for this, just so we can see how that works. Okay, now we're not using grid start, column start, we're not using any of that. We're just going to be putting in grid areas, and because they all have different names, it should work. All right, so let's see, and there you go. All right, this is doing exactly what is set up here. As you can see, 1, 2, 2, and then 3 is 2 of these, 3, 3, and then 4, and then salmon skips over 5 and 6 and goes straight to 7. Okay, so that's how that works. Hopefully this has given you enough of a start of just the practical stuff of grid that you can actually either understand other layouts if it's using grid, or you can write your own in some parts and it can actually solve a lot of hard problems for you. Okay, cool. So download everything from the link to the Google Drive below. All the text stuff that I have, all the reference links, they're all in the either down below or on my website. So come check out the Discord, come visit me on the website, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.